welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture. I'm Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you're here, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Well, the Bharata First team runs several quizzes. Do participate in them and improve your knowledge. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. Let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center. It's an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details and register now. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Don't miss out. Register right now, as there's so much more that we have to offer here. All this information, along with some must-see recommendations, are in the description of the video. Please go through it. And now on to the discussion. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who chaired the first in-person GST Council meet held since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, said on September 17th that the Council has decided against bringing petrol and diesel under the GST regime. The issue of petrol and diesel was discussed. Several states said that they do not want to bring these under GST. Delhi Finance Minister Manish Sisodia had earlier said at the 45th GST Council meet held in Lucknow on the 17th of September that this is not the right time to decide if petrol and diesel should be brought under the goods and services tax regime. Central excise and state VAT make up for almost half of the retail selling price of petrol and diesel. Bringing them under the GST would impact revenue generation for the states. Meanwhile, the cess on goods such as soft drinks, tobacco, coal, and cars will go towards repayment of loans to compensate states for GST shortfall up to March 2026. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the 45th GST Council meeting. Joining me on the program today are Professor Charan Singh, CEO, eGrow Foundation, and Vinita Hariharan, public policy expert working with the Government of India. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Professor, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the key takeaways from the GST Council meeting.
I am really impressed with the meeting that happened yesterday. And most importantly, I would look at the meeting in a very different angle other than economics only. The friendly environment that the minister mentioned in the beginning of the press conference is extremely important for me. In a country which is so diverse and different ideologies in different states, all the state finance ministers come and get together. And this was the first physical meeting in 20 months. And the finance minister clearly acknowledged the friendly environment in which the meeting was conducted. Also, the environment in which she said that the future meetings would be conducted and each finance minister trying to say, please, I would like to host the next meeting. That is the most important thing in such a diverse country, such different ideologies, that the finance ministers across the country come together and take a common call. That's the most important thing to me. The other thing that I liked, and I would like to mention this very specifically, that there are vexed issues in GST. They have set up a group of ministers, two of them, to sort these out. And I thought that's very, very important. And why I think that's very important is, I have been always advocating, like you had the Monetary Policy Committee for the monetary policy, a permanent body of 6 experts, 3 from outside, 3 from within. You also need to have a finance commission on permanent basis. These issues that keep coming up, they need to constantly get sorted out. Like they have set up a group of ministers now, they have to set up the committee and report back in 2 months to 3 months. I think that is the way forward. In case there are vexed issues which need to be discussed, these can go to the group of ministers and they can sort it out. And if there was a permanent finance commission, this would automatically happen. So my opening remarks would be very happy with the type of environment in which the meeting was conducted and very happy with the approach that the ministers took.
Absolutely. Very key, these aspects that you raised, Professor, to set the tone really of the key takeaways as far as the GST Council meet is concerned. With Vinita Hariharan, let me bring you into the picture now, and let's understand, from your perspective, what were the key highlights and what is it that stood out for you the most?
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. I couldn't agree more with Dr. Charan Singh when he says that it was organized in a very cordial manner, and the first GST meeting after COVID, a physical meeting. So I think that makes history of sorts. So besides that, if we get into the fine print, I think there's a lot of concessions done on medicines and COVID drugs and essential medicines. I think that's a very good. Reform in terms of looking at the social impact of GST. So that's what the council does, actually looking at social and social impacts while deciding on rates. And of course, the fitment committee decides on minute rate aspects, which has also been done. A slew of measures taken on reduction and increase of rates wherever they found that it's socially or relevant or appropriate or inappropriate. So starting with medicines, I think that's a good step. Oncology and COVID drugs reduced. And of course, certain aspects like e-commerce delivery apps now coming under the GST net. I think that has now become a little contentious. But then I think it's high time that they come under the GST net, because they are leveraging on the times that are. So I think they also need to be responsible and contribute to the tax net of the country. But of course, the implementation of all of this is going to be it has to be done carefully, because there are various categories of restaurants, and how are they going to pan it out, and how is the end consumer going to be impacted out of all of these measures. And of course, the big issue was the petrol and diesel prices, which did not get passed in the GST Council. That was a big disappointment. I think the states have just not relented. And so that we are going to see the impact of it coming now. I don't know how we're going to take it forward, because that would have been a huge relief for the consumers if petroleum products had come under the GST, like we discussed in the show earlier. It almost reduces the prices by almost 45%. So I think that was a big miss. So we hope that going forward, the council would be able to convince states to get the petroleum products into the GST net.
Absolutely. I think this is a very valid point. Let's build on this, Professor, and take this forward, on this issue of GST or rather bringing petrol and diesel under the ambit of the GST. This is something that we've been speaking for a while now. And, even this time around, the finance minister said that the time hasn't come, or the time is not right to bring these products under the ambit of the GST. How would you look at this, and when will the time be right? Because the entire nation is looking forward to this, because they want, fuel prices to come down. Fuel prices are at a century now, and the general public want the fuel prices to come down. And the only answer to this seems like the GST.
So let me bring 2-3 points first to you. One is, I must mention that this government listens. At the Kaun Banega Crorepati, there is this story of a young child, and Farah Khan, I think, is betting for this boy or a child who needs medicine for 16 crore, and they have taken care. And in this council, they have made an exemption. So the government listens. But why does the government not listen when it comes to petrol? Right? So it is, on one hand, there's such an instant correction that has happened. On the other hand, the petrol thing, as you rightly said, has been on the boiling point for nearly 1 year. And everybody is saying that why they don't bring it under the GST. Why does the government not listen here? So that means there is something much more than meets the eye. So what is that not meets the eye? Given that there's a diverse country, different ideologies, different states at different levels of growth, different states which have different revenue streams, different states where the important variable which provides tax is different. So that is where the issue gets involved. As you would know, Maharashtra benefits a lot from not getting it into the GST Council and not discussing it. On one hand, the principle is one tax, one nation. And petrol is one such product which is used across the country in every state, in every nook and corner of the country. Why are they not bringing it in? So my feeling is that in difficult times, this serves as a buffer. It's a very important source of revenue, much more important for states like Maharashtra. But because it's a very important source of revenue, they do not really want to bring it under the GST Council. As you would have noticed, what happens in the GST Council? Utter transparency and threadbare discussion. Utter. Now, once you bring such an important revenue source under GST, that transparency and that common taxation may hurt some states. So therefore, and it is okay. I don't deny the fact that there are difficult times and challenges that are happening. When GST Council for the first time met and decided what all will be part of it, obviously this was kept aside because this would serve as a buffer. In the COVID times when normal sources of revenue are drying up or showing little challenges, this certainly has served as a buffer. And that's where you said the price of petrol, diesel is touching 100. And just a year back, year and a half back, it was around 70. So you see the journey has been very sharp. It's obvious that it has served as a buffer. Bringing it in the council may take some time. Now, the discussion that happened in the 45th council happened because the court in Kerala had asked it, because now there is, amongst the states, there is so much of difference of opinion, but it seems the majority of them did not want to get it included. So therefore, now they will go back to the court and say that this is the overall position, which I think is okay. Sooner or later, when we have this principle of one tax, one country, this obviously will have to add in. When would that be? I think that would be when the economic environment in the country improves. That means the growth trajectory recovers back to its old time. The GST regime stabilizes. As it is, as you would have noticed, the type of discussions that took place in this GST, the GST regime has still not fully stabilized. Until it stabilizes, revenue sources are predictable. The trajectory of GST collection is predictable. Until then, the very motive of using these 5 products as a buffer should be allowed to the state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These are some very valid points, and we have to look at it and take it forward in that perspective. You know, talking about stabilization, talking about stability, Vinita Hariharan, let's talk about another vexed issue, that of cess and also the contribution to the states. And, you know, the cess, the government has decided to extend it now for a little more time. Do you now think that the states will be a little more comfortable, or do you see this being an issue going forward as well?
Yeah, so I think since the government has decided to continue with the compensation sets and because of the debt burden that they have to pay back, and I think it has not become a contentious issue in the 45th Council. So we did not hear much about states reacting to this aspect about the state share. So, but I think the government has met its, deficit, whatever it had lagged behind in terms of giving this revenue back to the states. So I think that is being done and that is being resolved. So that's not a contentious issue anymore. But taking forward the petroleum product issue, which is what was the elephant in the room and which got missed out, we were like in the entire country was, actually awaiting that, and that was a big ticket decision that was to be made. So I think going forward, going from where Dr. Singh just mentioned, it's important for states to look at other sources of revenue as well, not just petroleum and diesel, revenue, and also some states like Kerala. It's an irony that Kerala High Court actually passed the order for bringing it under GST, and Kerala is one of the biggest opponents of bringing the finance minister of Kerala forced it tooth and nail to bring the petroleum products under GST. So that's something that needs some political correction, and also states have looked at widening the resource base, the revenue base beyond petroleum, diesel, lottery, and liquor sales. So I think that is something that in future we need to take cognizance of. And also perhaps this can be done in a phased manner where that is not huge in some states like Maharashtra. It's a huge revenue base. So in states where it's not such a huge revenue base, maybe we can look at implementing this in a phased manner, which again leads to a lot of implementation issues. But I think that's one way forward that we can go forward in terms of bringing petroleum and diesel under the GST net. So I just spoke about that also because that is the big the item that needed to be discussed with the council. And also, I think another good thing about bringing in rate corrections and periodical intervals is that one need not wait for the union budget every year. For in the past, we used to wait with bated breath for union budgets to announce the the concessions and tax and what are the tax hikes and various products. But this happens now periodically, looking at exigencies. So because of this fitment committee that has come in and wherein we can intervene at periodical intervals, we've been able to reduce prices on drugs and essential items and wherever there's an exigency. So I think that's a good thing about the GST Council.
Absolutely. Time to get closing comments now. We're talking about way forward. So best way forward and what we can expect and what needs to be done so as to so that we can see a fully stabilized GST regime, borrowing a word from you, Professor. So what's the best way forward? Please, Professor Charan Singh.
So as I mentioned, of course, a permanent commission would be always most welcome. And that has been recommended by the finance commissions also. I would also say, and I like it in this, the way they have corrected when the food deliveries take place, but the tax collection doesn't take place. Now, this is something which worries me constantly in our country. We are not very tax compliant people. Every possible chance that we get, we try to find ways and means to create another leakage. And the way the bureaucrats and the council has been ahead of us and said, okay, if this is how you want to do on food deliveries, the aggregator will now have to pay the tax. I think this is exactly the way, identifying the loopholes, plugging them, and being ahead of the market. That I think is being very alert. So that is another thing to make it more stable. The third thing is, there are still markets in our country, and you and me know it very well. Across the length and breadth of the country, there are markets which still do not or have yet not adopted the system of keeping their accounts. They would generally tell you, if you want to pay tax, here is the bill. If you're not, I don't care, you don't care. And even today, that is happening. That's the revenue leakage. And when we expect from the government first-class hospitals and high-class roads, we don't pay taxes, we have to feel guilty about it. And I think the government has to also now swing into action, and having done so much of spade work, having realized that there are loopholes like in the food delivery, I think they need to identify the markets, especially the wholesale markets where these things happen all the time. So finally, the last point I would like to make, it's very important to incentivize. There's a carrot and a stick policy. The stick policy should work strongly, but even the carrot policy should work. So they have to think of incentives. People who are very good and tax compliant, how do we reward them? And how do we ensure that others take a lesson from them and are more tax compliant? That needs to be thought through.
Absolutely. Vinita Hariharan?
Yeah, so going forward, I think implementation would be the biggest challenge, especially for new entrants like e-commerce players and the restaurant industry. So how do we implement it? How does it pan out? Because initially, we remember when GST was introduced, there were a lot of legal issues. So I think the government should engage more in hand-holding states and to have frequent discussions and frequent stakeholder consultations and hand-holding more than consultations. So I think there is a need for financial advisors or revenue advisors for state governments to look at how they can expand their revenue base beyond the usual suspects, so to speak. Just the petroleum, just I mentioned petroleum and liquor, etc. So we need to look at how states can widen their revenue base, how states can improve their respective economies, and also larger handholding for various new entrant operators into the GST net.
Absolutely. Yes, Professor, I saw you putting up your hand. Please, the
yes,
last word on the program.
Yes, I just want to share an anecdote with you, and if you consider it appropriate. Now, I was buying bulk sweaters to be gifted to some place in Bangalore. And there, when I went, every person or every shopkeeper kept telling me if you want the bill or not the bill. And I said, okay. But one of them told me, sir, if you want the bill, you can take it right now. If you don't want the bill, please visit my shop after 6:30. I said, why after 6:30? He said, GST inspectors are everywhere in the market. They go home by 5:30. The last one probably will leave by 6. So if you come at 6:30, you can easily take it without anybody stopping you on the street. So the point which Madam just made, the implementation part is very, very important. I think that needs to be rigorously done and implemented in the right earnest. That is how the GST collection will go up and the message will go up that the country is not going to allow leakages. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the first in-person GST Council meet that took place since the pandemic broke out was held in a friendly and cordial manner. And that was the biggest takeaway. There was consensus on the issues that were discussed. There was much talk about petrol and diesel again, but the council took a decision that the time is not right to bring fuel under the ambit of the GST right now. In these difficult times, the revenue that is earned from fuel acts as a buffer. When we have one country, one tax, when the economic environment in the country improves, and when the GST regime stabilizes, perhaps then we can see it happening. Going forward, we have to identify the areas of revenue leakages and plug those loopholes, like we've done in the case of the food delivery apps. We have to use the carrot and the stick method, and that will work best with regards to tax compliance, and it will incentivize those who are paying their taxes as well. Well, before I go, once again, let me remind you to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs several quizzes. You can participate in them and improve your knowledge. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. Let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center. It's an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details and register now. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Don't miss out. Register right now, as there's so much more that we have to offer. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.